Hey everybody, this is GGB. Unfortunately, no co-host Poppers at the present moment. My mom is taking her on a walk, but I couldn't wait. I don't know why the hell I couldn't wait. But let's get into these games. I got, obviously, a lot of information on these games. It took me a long time, which is why some of these videos might be out a little bit late. But at 11 o'clock, we got Colgate, the Red Raiders, traveling to Boston College. So let's start with the Red Raiders a little bit. Most people don't remember what Colgate did last year because it wasn't live. And they don't remember what they did 2 years ago, which is like, I take two numbers from 2 years ago because of COVID and stuff, you know? In 2020, did not have a good year. They went 0-2. Now in 2019, they still did not have a good year. They went 4-8, right? And they started out that year 0-7. So obviously not ideal, but they did win 4 out of their last 5 games. So was impressive end to the season. They thought they had momentum, and then COVID hit, and then it kind of ruined Colgate's hopes of being good in 2020. Now Boston College, on the other hand, they went 6-5, right? But you look, of those 11 games they played, 6 of them were one-possession games. So this is a Boston College team that is hanging in, or the other teams are hanging with most of the time. So this is a pretty solid Boston College team. They had a 3-point win against Texas State, so that's obviously not ideal. Texas State isn't a phenomenal team. You have a 4-point loss to number 12 at the time, UNC. So, again, that's a reasonable loss to have. Plus, it was a close game. Then you have the 1-point win against Pitt. You had a 6-point loss to, number 1 Clemson at that point. So, that one, obviously, a lot of people remember that game because Trevor Lawrence was out, and it was Boston College's chance to upset. Now, they didn't get the upset, but Boston College definitely did make an impact on a lot of people. They also had the 3-point win against Syracuse and a 7-point win against Louisville. So as you can see, they played in a lot of close games last year. Also, schedule not the toughest this year. So this is a Boston College team that has a chance to improve upon last year's team, right? So I guess I'm a little bit excited for Boston College and see what they're able to do this year. I mean, really, outside of Clemson on that side, I mean, there's no dominant team. It could be Boston College as the second best team on that side. I mean, there's Syracuse, there's Florida State. I mean, there's not a lot over there. I think this could be Boston College's year. When I was doing this stuff, the line was not out yet for Colgate at Boston College, but I'm going to bet it's a lot. And I'm going to go with, I'll put your money on Boston College. Boston College, the Eagles are good enough for it. Put your money on the Boston College Eagles. Then at 11 o'clock, we got Army traveling to Georgia State. The Army Black Knights and then the Georgia State Panthers. This is on ESPNU, by the way. So we have Army went 9-3 last year. Army's always a good team. I honestly believe that. I believe that Army, no matter what, you're going to get a good team that runs the option extremely effectively. I'm actually really impressed with what Army's been able to do. He's been able to build a program where these aren't guys that are hoping to go into the NFL. These are just guys that are going to get an education and then go into the Army. So I think it's really impressive. Now, Georgia State and Army has played once before. That matchup was won by Georgia State in 2019. The score was 28-21. So this could be a very good game. There's a reason why the spread is only 2 points here. It could be a really, really good football game. Let's talk about Army a little bit. Last year they went 9-3. They went 3-1. In their one-possession games, they had a 5-point win against Citadel. Obviously not ideal. Citadel's not a good team. But they had a 1-point win against Georgia Southern. That's a pretty solid win. 3-point win against Air Force. Again, Air Force, one of the better Mountain West teams. And then they had the 3-point loss to West Virginia in their bowl game. And again, that one was a really close game too. And Army really had control for most of that game. It was just bad luck got them to that point. And it really is unfortunate for Army because they really had a good team at that point. Now, Georgia State, on the other hand, you look at that. They went 6-4 last year. Also a pretty good year for Georgia State. They went 2-2 in their one-possession games. They had a 3-point overtime loss to UL Lafayette. Really sucked for them because that was a chance to make a big-time impact early. UL Lafayette was in the top 25. They were undefeated at that point. They could have gotten the win. They had a 2-point win against Troy. Obviously not ideal on that one either. Troy's normally not one of the better Sun Belt teams. They had a 4-point loss to App State. Obviously held it close with App State. That's pretty impressive. Obviously that win would have been really nice to have on your resume. And then they had the 6-point win against Georgia Southern. Against Georgia Southern is their rival and also a very good option team. So I was really impressed with what Georgia State's been able to do last year. Plus, remember in their bowl game, they blew out Western Kentucky. This is really a toss-up game to me, but I'm going to go with the team that I've seen more out of in the past few years. I'm going to go with Army. I think Army's a team that if things fall right, that could be in the top 25 at some point this year, and maybe like at the very fringe of a playoff conversation. Because I mean, their schedule is not difficult at all. If you go undefeated, it's a possibility. You are an independent team, but give me Army in this game to win and obviously cover because they're not favored by anything. 11 o'clock, you got UL Monroe traveling to Kentucky. So obviously this is not the ideal game for UL Monroe. UL Monroe went 0-10 last year. 0-10. They had one game that was a one-possession game. They had a 5-point loss to Georgia Southern, right? The game that I remember the most, I was looking at the scores and I'm like, oh my God. They lost 70-20 to UL Lafayette. Now again, the Raging Cajuns are a really good team. Billy Napier's built up that program. Still shouldn't lose 70-20. That's embarrassing UL Monroe. UL Monroe is 1-4 against Kentucky. So in the other side, Kentucky's 4-1 against UL Monroe. Kentucky's won 4 straight. Kentucky last year though, they went 5-6. If you don't remember, they had some games that if they had one game where they could have been 6-5 last year. They could have been. I mean, it's really like there's not a big swing. There's not a lot of games where Kentucky was really close. Their only really loss was a 1-point overtime loss to Ole Miss. Now their other one-possession games, they had a 3-point win against Vanderbilt and a 2-point win against NC State. So GGB, I know you're asking. Why did you put them in your most underrated team if they went 5-6 last year and they didn't really have any close games? Glad you asked. And it's because of this man, Will Levis. Will Levis is a quarterback transfer out of Penn State. He's looked extremely solid at Penn State, but obviously not better than Sean Clifford. And just the fact is, Kentucky has always been decent quarterback play if you watch them play. Now, they might be not one possession away, but like, let's be honest, that defense is stout. They always have a good run game. Like, if you have a quarterback that can throw any ball, then you have a chance at winning a lot of games. And that's what I think Kentucky has in Will Levis. It's going to be his first game. It's the reason why they're favored by 31 points in this game. Obviously, put your money on Kentucky. This is on the SEC Network, by the way. At 11 o'clock, we got Western Michigan traveling to Normal, Michigan, right? So Western Michigan went 4-2 last year. They started 4-0, so that was pretty impressive. They had 3 games that were close and went 2-1 in those games. They had a 3-point win against Toledo and a 3-point win against Northern Illinois, and then they had a 3-point loss to Ball State. So there is a universe where Western Michigan went 5-1. Their only loss that couldn't have been avoided was this 53-42 game by Eastern Michigan. But like, I don't see, like, that's not a toss-up game. But honestly, there is a universe where Western Michigan goes 5-1, and we're very high on this Western Michigan team. I mean, there's a reason why this spread, I believe, is only 16.5. Now, I wrote this down last night, so the spread could have changed in this morning. But, like, Michigan last year did not have the best year. They went 2-4. They had 2 close games. They had 2 one-possession games. They went 1-1 in those games. They had a 3-point loss to Michigan State, and they had a 6-point triple overtime win against Rutgers. So, I mean, like, This was a Michigan team that was not very good last year. When one of your only 2 wins is against Rutgers and it took you 3 overtimes to get it, that's not an ideal scenario if you're Michigan. Now, on 2019 side of things, if you want to go back, like a whole bunch of teams that I think are really good in the Big Ten lost, or did not look good last year. Now, Michigan's not one of those teams, but like to get an accurate example of what this team probably is, you go back to 2019. They went 9-4. They had 3 close games. They went 2-1 in those games. They had a lot of people remember the 3-point double overtime win against Army. They had a 7-point win against Iowa, and then they had a 7-point loss to Penn State. They ended the season though 0-2. They started out the season 9-2, right? And then they ended the season 0-2 with a loss to Ohio State and Alabama in the bowl game. Yeah, so honestly, I think Western Michigan's a very solid team this year. I think if they win the Ball State game, we're looking at this as a very different game. I'm going to go with Michigan to win, but like I think Western Michigan could end up making this game and cover the 16.5-point spread. At 11 o'clock, we got Fordham traveling to Nebraska, so not like the best game here. The only reason this is still a case is because, unfortunately for us, even though Nebraska's 0-1, they're technically playoff eligible. It's the only reason I'm picking this game. It's on the Big Ten Network, by the way. So let's go back to 2020 for Fordham. They went 2-1, no one-possession games, which I found interesting. 2019 is the season, like, you're probably going to get a better accurate representation of what most of these FCS teams are. And Fordham went 4-8, right? So they had a 3-point loss to Central Connecticut, a 7-point win against Richmond, a 3-point win against Georgetown, a 3-point overtime loss against Lehigh, and a 4-point loss against Lafayette. So this could be you could have made this a 7 and 5 balls club. I mean, like, if you win those close games, you could make the 7 and 5 ball club. But Fordham did not do that, and they're still not even close to Nebraska's skill level, despite Nebraska probably being the worst team in the Big Ten. Nebraska, on the other hand, I didn't know if you... let's go over the records real quick. Obviously, 2020 was bad for them. It went 3-5. 2019 went 5-7, and 2018 went 4-8. Those are Scott Frost's years. Obviously not ideal. In 2020, they had an 8-point loss. So most of the games, actually, of the 8 games they've played, 5 of them were one possessions, and some of them could have flipped, honestly. They had an 8-point loss to Northwestern. They had a 7-point win against Penn State, a 6-point loss against Iowa, a 7-point loss against Minnesota, a 7-point win against Rutgers. So if you look at that, like, this could have been a different team in 2020 if you win the Iowa, Minnesota, and Northwestern games, right? If you win those 3-1 possession games, this could have been a 6-2 team. And I think if this is a 6-2 team, that last year, we're looking at Scott Frost in a whole nother light. You think that maybe you can turn them around. Nebraska's on the up, like, they're on the uptick. They're getting better. Unfortunately for Scott Frost, this is probably his last team year. If you did the math, Scott Frost has a record in Nebraska of 12-21. That is really bad. That is not a good record to have. I think Nebraska is a really bad football team, honestly. I think Scott Frost is gone after this year, but I still think Nebraska is a way better football team than Fordham ever will be. So give me Nebraska to win this game. At 11 o'clock, we got Stanford traveling to Kansas State, and a team I think, again, in the 11 o'clock window, we have like 3 teams that I picked as underrated, and this is one of the teams, is Kansas State. But let's talk about Stanford a little bit first. They went 4-2 last year, so like right off the bat, you're thinking maybe they're a better team than Kansas State. Hold yourself a little bit. So, of the 6 games they played in, 5 of them were one possession games. They had a 3-point loss to Colorado. They had a 1-point win against Cal. They had a 5-point win against number 22 Washington. They had a 3-point win against Oregon State, and they had a 1-point double overtime win over UCLA. So again, that's impressive. I'm like, honestly, this could have been a 5-1 team. Like that is conceivable for the Stanford team. Unfortunately for you, a large portion of why you won these games was because of Davis Mills. You look at the numbers in the loss against Colorado, he threw for 327 yards. Win against Cal, he threw for 209 yards. His win against Washington, he threw for 252 yards. His win against Oregon State, he threw for 292 yards. His win against UCLA, he threw for 428 yards. So again, this isn't a guy that was just like a part of the offense. This was the guy that was running the offense. And also, you're talking about Mills was 4-1 starting, right? He's the reason. Like, the first game you played was without Mills, and you guys got crushed. So, like, he's a major reason why you won those games. Simi Fehoko also left in the draft. If you don't remember, he went to the Cowboys. He was the leading receiver in 4 of these games. So, like this isn't a receiving core that's killing it without Simi Fehoko. So, I'm a little bit worried a lot of things about Stanford. Stanford, by the way, is 1-0 against Kansas State. They played in 2016. They won 26-13, right? Kansas State, on the other hand, in my opinion, favored by 3 points on FS1. They went 4-6 last year, but they lost their last 5. They went 0-5 over that streak. But Skylar Thompson, their star quarterback, I think is going to be drafted this year and could play his way high in the draft stocks if Kansas State does well, got hurt after 2 games last year. By the way, their one-possession games, they had a 4-point loss to Arkansas State at the beginning of the year. They had a 3-point win against Oklahoma. Everyone remembers that game. They had a 7-point win against TCU. They had a 2-point loss to Oklahoma State, and they had a 1-point loss to Baylor, right? So, like, honestly, if you flip some of these, the Arkansas State one, the Oklahoma State one, the Baylor one, you could, conceivably, this could have been a 7-3 team last year. That is something that could have happened with the Skylar Thompson injury. That is insane to me. With your starting quarterback injured, this is a team that could have conceivably went 7-3. That is a universe where there is a universe where that happened. If there's, you believe in the multiverse kind of thing, there is a universe where Kansas State went 7-3 last year. I also like to point out Chris Kleiman is 2-0 against Oklahoma, but he is 10-11 against everyone else. So under 500 against anyone not named Oklahoma. That's pretty bad. That's not ideal. In my opinion, Kansas State is the most underrated team in the Big 12. I think this is a team that has the possibility of going to the playoffs. I understand that is maybe a little bit of a stretch. You look at this team, they have a very good offense. You know the defense is going to be coached solid with Chris Kleiman there, and it's Kansas State. Their schedule works out extremely nice for them. I mean, this is a Kansas State team that conceivably, if they get in their stride at the right time, could beat everyone on their schedule and make it to the playoffs. This is a Wildcats team that I think is extremely good. So give me, obviously, Kansas State. I think they're going to win and cover. At 11 o'clock, we got Tulane traveling to number 2 Oklahoma. Oklahoma's favored by 31.5 points on ABC, right? So Tulane last year went 6-6. So I know that's not impressive for an American team, but you just follow me here, okay? They had a 3-point win against South Alabama. They had a 3-point loss to Navy. They had a 3-point overtime loss to SMU, and they had a 6-point double overtime loss to Tulsa, right? You flip those 3 losses there, where they had a close game against 3 of the better teams in the American, you could make this a 9-3 ball club. I understand I've been saying this a lot, and people are gonna be getting annoyed with it, but there's a freshman quarterback named Pratt on this team that was phenomenal down the stretch. Absolutely great. Honestly, he was the reason why they were still in the SMU game. There's a reason why they beat Memphis by 14 points last year, guys. This is they beat Memphis, which is a top-tier American team. Tulane's good. Now, you look at the history, Oklahoma's 1-0 against Tulane. They played, I don't know when they played, but they beat Oklahoma beat them 56-14, right? Now, Oklahoma last year, they went 9-2, but the impressive thing is they started 1-2. They were able to turn that around. They went 8 straight. They went 1-2. So, they played 4 one-possession games last year. They had the 3-point loss to Kansas State that everyone remembers. They had the 7-point loss to Iowa State, which put them out of the playoff picture in, week 3. But then, they had the 5-point win, the 8-point win against Texas in quadruple overtime. That was the game that kind of started Spencer Rattler's awesomeness, him playing extremely well. And then they had the 6-point win against Iowa State in the Big 12 championship, and then they had the game everyone remembers, the Cotton Bowl, when they absolutely crushed Florida. So Spencer Rattler, guys, he has 11-2 odds to win the Heisman. That's the highest of all players, which is crazy. Spencer Rattler is going to be really good this year. I honestly believe that. But Tulane's being underrated in this game. I'm going to be honest. I don't see this being a 31.5 point game. I see this being maybe a 14 point game. Give me Tulane to cover this game. Honestly, I think Tulane's going to cover. Oklahoma's going to win it outright. 11 o'clock, we got my favorite game. We got number 19, Penn State. We got them traveling to number 12, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is favored by 5.5 points in this game on Fox. But I think if you're going to tell the true story of Penn State, you got to look at 2020 and 2019. I think that's true for both of these teams. In 2020, they did not have a good year. They went 4-5. But on the bright side for Penn State, they started out 0-5 and they ended 4-0. So in the early going, they had the obvious hurtful loss, the 1-point overtime loss to Indiana, where they could have won at so many different times. If you're Penn State, you could have made they had so many field goals they missed. They had Noah King running for a touchdown when if he just goes down at the 1-yard line, they can take knees and win the game. That was a game where Penn State honestly should have won it. They made many mistakes, and Indiana kind of stole that in a way from Penn State. Then they had the 13-point loss to Ohio State. Now, I understand that is a lot of points, but it was really one of the closer games all year for Ohio State, so I'm going to count that as kind of like a win for Penn State. Their offense was able to get going against them. Then they had the 7-point loss to Nebraska, which was, to me, rock bottom. I can handle getting a blowout loss against, even Maryland, and Iowa, and even Maryland. But like losing to Nebraska, it like really hurt. So I think that was the last that was the game where we hit 0-5, and then we turned the game around. We turned it around. 2019, on the other hand, you had a Penn State team that went 11-2. They had 5 one-possession games. They went 4-1 in those one-possession games. They had a 7-point win against Pitt, a 5-point win against Iowa, a 7-point win against Michigan. They had a 5-point loss against Minnesota, and they had a 7-point win against Indiana. This was a very, very good team in 2019. A lot of people forget that, considering how much they were bad last year. But like in 2019, this was a team that was in the playoff conversation in November. Mike Yurcich, first year as a Penn State offensive coordinator. I'm really annoyed for Penn State's sake that we keep switching offensive coordinators every freaking year. Like, I really want someone to, like, stay. I want someone to, like, have some semblance of, like, coercion and, like, I don't know if that's the right word. Like, cohesiveness, that's it. Some level of cohesiveness with this unit. Like, I mean, they keep losing everyone they have. Penn State is 10-9 against Wisconsin, so they have the winning record. They have a 4-game win streak against Wisconsin. They've beat the last 4 times they played Penn State has won. Wisconsin, on the other hand, is ranked 12th this year. They're favored by 5.5 points in this game, by the way. They went 4-3 last year. Not good. They had an 8-point loss, I think, against Indiana. That wasn't good. But they had a 3-point overtime win against Minnesota. So, like, they did not have the most ideal year, but, like speaking, they could have gone 5-2 last year, and that's not the worst thing of all time. But you have look at 2019. This was a little bit better indicator of what kind of team Wisconsin is at. They went 10-4. They had a 1-point loss to Illinois, and that kind of put them out of the playoff picture. And they had a 2-point win against number 18 Iowa and a 1-point loss against number 6 Oregon in the bowl game, right? So what's the big difference between 2019 and 2020? I came up with 2 big differences in. You got a new quarterback. This is Graham Mertz running the offense, and he looked better in week 1, but he got COVID, so like it wasn't great. It wasn't a great performance, obviously. And then through the offseason, they also lost Jonathan Taylor that year. And like Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs Wisconsin has ever had. He was phenomenal. So like they tried to replace him. Jalen Berger is hoping to fill that void. I don't know. They need someone to be able to run the ball. I think this is going to be a good Wisconsin team. I genuinely believe that. But I do give me the upset here. Last time there was a 5.5 point spread, I put my money on Virginia Tech and they won. So give me Penn State to go to Madison, Wisconsin and beat them. Now 11 o'clock, we got Temple at Rutgers, guys. We got Temple went 1-6 last year. Rutgers 3-6. So like it's not ideal. Like both these teams did not have the seasons they wanted. Now Temple had two one-possession games. They went 1-1 in those games. They got a 2-point loss to Navy. They had a 2-point win against USF. Right. Rutgers, on the other hand, they had like 5 one-possession games, and you could see the progress Greg Schiano made in his first year. They went 3-6. That was a better record than I think if you combined all the other records for the guy before him. This was a much better Rutgers team last year than it has ever been before, since I've started watching football. They had a 3-point loss to Illinois last year. They had a 6-point triple overtime loss against Michigan, closest they've held Michigan in a long time. They had a 7-point win against Purdue. That is impressive, being able to beat Purdue. I don't remember the last time Rutgers has been able to do that. They had a 3-point overtime win against Maryland. So again, they haven't been able to do that in a while. And they had a 7-point loss to Nebraska. Again, the Nebraska thing's not a lot to hold your hat on, but Greg Schiano definitely turned this program around. I am a big fan of Rutgers moving forward. I think they're going to be somewhat decent, and they're not going to be the doormat of the Big Ten anymore, at least in my opinion. But give me Rutgers to win this game and cover. I haven't gotten the spread yet, but give me Rutgers to cover. At 1 o'clock, moving past the 11 o'clock games, we got Rice at Arkansas, my guys. Arkansas went 3-7 last year. Rice went 2-3, but Arkansas was favored by 19.5 points this game on ESPN Plus, by the way, if you wanted to watch it. Right, let's go to Rice for a little bit. Rice went obviously 2-3. They had 2 one-possession losses. They didn't have a single one-possession win, so that's pretty impressive. They had a 6-point double overtime loss to Middle Tennessee. And they had a 5-point loss to UAB. Like, theoretically, this could have been a 4-1 Rice team last year. Like, that's a universe that could have happened. By the way, Rice is 29-35 against Arkansas. Like, this is a somewhat close series. Like, this isn't a one-sided series by any means. And I think Arkansas has a one-game win streak. Last time they played, though, was in 1991. So, again, a while ago. Arkansas, on the other hand, Sam Pittman's first year coaching, he comes in. He actually turns this Arkansas program around a little bit. You can see they're actually competing. They had a 7-point win against, again, at that point, number 16 in the country, Mississippi State. They had a 2-point loss against, at that point in the time, number 13 in the country, Auburn. They had a 3-point loss to LSU, and they had a 2-point loss to Missouri. Like, this is the closest Arkansas has been playing teams in a long time. Sam Pittman has turned his team around like that. It's really impressive, in my opinion, what Arkansas has turned into as a program. I'm looking forward to watching Arkansas moving forward. I think Arkansas is going to crush Rice, if I'm going to be honest. So give me Arkansas in blowout fashion to cover the 19.5-point spread and destroy Rice. At 1 o'clock, we got Lafayette, not UL Lafayette, not a good team, Lafayette, traveling to Air Force, right? So if you want to look at 2020, they went 2-1. They had one one-possession game. That was a 7-point win against Lehigh. Now in 2019, that's like the more interesting one to look at. You had a lot of one-possession games. You had a 3-point loss to Mountain Mouth. You had a 4-point loss to Penn. You had a 4-point loss to Georgetown. 4-point win against Bucknell. 4-point win against Fordham. 3-point win against Holy Cross, and 1-point win against Lehigh. So they're close in one possession. Actually, they're like 5-3 in one-possession games. That's pretty solid. That's a good record to have. Now, Air Force went 3-3, and they had one possession game, and that was a 3-point win, 3-point loss against Army. Right? They won 2 out of their last 3 though. So like they started out 1-2, and then they were able to finish the season 2-1. So I mean, pretty impressive there. Air Force they've been normally pretty solid in the Mountain West. I'll give them a little pass for last year. They're a pretty good option team. Not as good as Army and Navy in my opinion, but they're pretty solid at the option. Air Force favored by 41 points in this game. I expect that to stand. The Falcons are really good this year. On Stadium TV, by the way, if you wanted to watch it. But I put my money on Air Force in this game. At 1 o'clock, we got Fresno State, which is sitting at 1-0, traveling to number 11, Oregon. Now, let's go to Fresno State for a little bit. Or just right off the bat, the records for both these teams. Fresno State is 2-7 against Oregon, and Oregon's on a 7-game win streak, so that's not ideal for Fresno State. Fresno State went 3-3 last year. They won 3 out of their last 4, so they started off not good. They went 1-2, actually 0-2, and then they were able to turn around. They went 3-1, right? So Fresno State last year, they obviously turned it around. Fresno State has been one of the top teams in the Mountain West for a long time. They won the Mountain West in 2018 with a 12-2 record. So I mean, like, they were really good in 2018. 10 points was their closest loss, by the way, this year. So I mean, obviously didn't have a good last year, but I think this could be a better build like team this year. Oregon, on the other hand, I could see them going through some growing pains early. They went 4-3 last year. They had a 3-point win against UCLA, 3-point loss against Oregon State, a 4-point loss to Cal, and a 7-point win against number 13 USC. So why do I think they're going to go through some growing pains? They lost Tyler Shao, their starting quarterback, for all of last year to transfer portal. They're going to be starting Anthony Brown Jr., who's a senior this year. But I think there could be some mistakes made early. And this is a Fresno State team that is normally really good at taking those mistakes and turning them into points. What I found was interesting, a lot of people remember this, but I kind of forgot about it. They won the Pac-12 despite not even winning the North because of poor Washington getting some COVID issues. But this is an Oregon team that I think is pretty solid. I think Fresno State is going to keep it close. I think Oregon's going to win, but not by 20.5 points. Give me Fresno State to cover. At 2:30, we got Miami, Ohio, heading to number 8, Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati's here by 22.5 points in this game. But Miami, Ohio has the winning record in this series. They're 59-58 against Cincinnati. By the way, this is on ESPN Plus if you want to watch it. Let's talk about Miami, Ohio a little bit. They went 2-1 last year, so they didn't play many games at all. They had a 7-point win against Ball State. That was their only one possession game. And Gabbert is probably the quarterback I think is going to start this year, but he had 308 passing yards, 48 rushing yards, and he went 1-0 in his only start. Now, on the other hand, for this like winning thing, sure, Miami, Ohio is a 59-58 record against them, but Cincinnati has a 14-game win streak against Miami, Ohio. I don't see that changing this year. Cincinnati, if you remember, they're ranked number 8 in the country this year. They went 9-1 last year. They had some impressive wins. They had three one-possession games. They went 2-1 in those games. They had a 3-point win against UCF, a 3-point win against number 23 at the time, Tulsa, and they had a 3-point loss, unfortunately, to number 9 Georgia. So that's not good if you're Cincinnati, obviously. Desmond Ridder is their quarterback, and he is honestly looking to be a first-round draft pick, and he's a first-round draft pick in many mock drafts. So, like, this season is a big deal for Desmond Ridder, and, like, there's not many locks for the first round. There's probably, like, there's the Georgia guy, JT Daniels. You have probably Spencer Rattler's a lock, and you have probably Sam Howell as a lock. But outside of those three, there's not many quarterbacks that are locks to go in the first round. Desmond Ridder's got to play well if he wants to go in the first round, and he could. So he's got to play well in this game. I think they're going to win, and they're going to win by a lot. Give me Cincinnati to cover this 22.5-point spread. At 2:30, we got West Virginia, which is sitting at 6-4. Went 6-4 last year. Traveling to Maryland. West Virginia's actually favored by 2.5 points in the game. It's on ESPN, by the way, if you want to watch it. Now, West Virginia is 28-22 against Maryland. They have a 2-game win streak against Maryland. So, how'd they go 6-4 last year? They had 4 one-possession games. They went 2-2 in those games. They had a 6-point double overtime win against Baylor. They had a 7-point Texas Tech loss. They had a 4-point loss to number 22 Texas, and they had a 3-point win against Army in their bowl game. So this is a West Virginia team that hangs a lot on their defense. There's very few teams in the Big 12 that I think have a great defense. West Virginia is legitimately one of the better defenses, at least I believe, in the entire country. They're coached extremely well by Neil Brown. This is a West Virginia team that is it's coached extremely solidly. Maryland, on the other hand, I think Mike Locksley has been a good coach. I think they went 2-3 last year. That was a pretty good season considering they only played 5 games. They played in 2 one-possession games, and they had a 1-point overtime loss to Minnesota and a 3-point overtime loss to Rutgers, right? This is a theoretical. If Mike Locksley, if this could have been a 4-1 team. That's a situation that could have happened for Maryland. Talia Tagovailoa has looked really good at Maryland. Also, for a good thing for Maryland, they beat Penn State first time since 2014 this year. So that's pretty impressive, in my opinion. West Virginia, I think, is a really good defensive team. I think Maryland's a pretty good offensive team. I think this is going to be a good matchup. Give me Maryland, though. I think Maryland's going to pull off the upset and beat West Virginia. At 2:30, we got Marshall Thundering Herd traveling down to the midshipmen, down to Navy. Marshall's going to be favored by 2.5 points in this game. It's going to be on CBS Sports Network. Marshall went 7-3 last year, and I'd like to point out, they started at 7-0 before faltering and going down the stretch 0-3, so that obviously wasn't great. They only had one possession game, and there was when they lost by 7 points against Buffalo in the bowl game, right? So here's their losses. They lost 20-0 to Rice. That was the big upset, I remember, of that week. They lost 22-13 to UAB in the Conference USA Championship, and then they lost 17-10 to Buffalo in the bowl game. But right before the end of the regular season, this was a team that was maybe we could sneak into the playoffs. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen because I obviously have Coastal Carolina as a better team ahead of them, and you had Cincinnati as a better team ahead of them. But this was probably the third best group of 5 at one point in the season. So Grant Wells was the freshman, and he was really, really good last year. Now you go to the Navy side of things. They went 3-7, so they had a down year. They had a 3-point win against Tulane, a 2-point win against Temple, a 4-point win against East Carolina, and a 3-point loss to Memphis. So this is a team that could have this season could have gone really badly. Their only 3 wins were one-possession games. They could have lost all of these, and they could have gone 0-10. They ended the season 0-5. They started out the season 3-2 and then ended at 0-5. They lost 5 straight. It was not good for Navy at all, right? Navy is a team I have more faith in. I know they're going to turn it around. Is Marshall going to turn it around? Honestly, that's a question that a lot of people have to ask. Is Marshall going to turn this thing around? I don't know. And I think Navy is going to turn it around. I think Navy's going to end up upsetting Marshall in this one. Give me Navy. At 2:30, we got number 17 Indiana traveling to number 18 Iowa. Now, Indiana is 28-45 against Iowa, and the 3-game win streak goes to Iowa. Now, Iowa's favored by 4 points in the game. It's on the Big Ten Network, by the way, despite being ranked lower than Indiana. Now, Indiana was 6-2 last year. A lot of people were surprised by the Hoosiers last year. They had a 1-point overtime win against Penn State. That was the big win of their season. They had a 7-point loss to Ohio State. I remember that game. They kept it really close. They had an 8-point win against Wisconsin, and then they had that 6-point loss in the bowl game of Ole Miss. But Michael Penix Jr. did not play in the last 2 games because he tore his ACL, if I remember correctly. Now you go to Iowa's side of things. They had 3 one-possession games. They went 1-2 in those games. Those first 2 games, they had a 4-point loss to Purdue, a 1-point loss to Northwestern, and then later in the season they had a 6-point win against Nebraska. Like, this is a team that started out 0-2, and those were the 2 losses. Like, honestly, this is theoretically could have been an 8-0 team last year, and they could have gone to the Big Ten championship instead of Northwestern if you don't lose those 2 games early. Like, Iowa was really good at the end of the year. They were 16th in the nation, if I remember correctly. They returned Spencer Petras, who was the quarterback for that great run at the end of the year. They returned Tyler Goodson, who was their main running back last year. They returned Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Sam Laparta, who were the leading receivers in all the games except for a couple. So, again, this is an Iowa team I think is really good this year. I think they're going to be, honestly, a playoff contender at the end of the year. I think you're going to be talking about Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota extremely highly at the end of the year. I think Iowa's going to win this game. Give me Iowa to beat Indiana at home and win this game, even though they're favored. At 2:30, we got number 1 Alabama traveling down. Actually, they're going to play at like a neutral stadium, but it's going to be Alabama. They're really home field advantage. But they're going to be playing number 14 Miami. Alabama's favored by 19.5 points in this game on ABC. So what happened last year for Alabama? Most people remember they went 13-0. Their only one-possession game was a 6-point win against Florida in the SEC championship. But they lose their starting quarterback, running back, and both their starting receivers. Now, the Jalen Waddle loss isn't as huge because last year you played most of the season without Jalen Waddle. So, I mean, it's not a huge loss, but still you're losing a very good receiver. You lose Damian, I want to say Damian Harris. I don't think that's right, though. Oh, my God, how am I forgetting this guy's name? He was the best running back of last year's draft class. You lose him, and then you lose Mac Jones, who went in the first round at quarterback last year. So I think there's going to be some growing pains, honestly. Miami last year, although they went 8-3, they had 3 one-possession games. They had a 5-point win against Virginia, a 1-point win against Virginia Tech, and a 3-point loss to Oklahoma State. Right? Fortunately for Miami, did not play well against ranked teams. They went 1-3 against the ranked teams under De'Ara King. They had a win against number 18 Louisville, but they lost badly to number 1 Clemson, number 17 UNC, and they lost by 3 points to Oklahoma State, ranked number 21 at the time. So who do I think is going to win this game? Obviously, I'm going to pick Alabama, but I do think Miami is good enough to cover in this game. Give me Miami to cover the 19.5 point spread, but Alabama to win this game outright. At 2:30, at 3 o'clock, we got UMass traveling to Pitt. Pitt's favored by 38 points. This game on the ACC Network. Now, UMass and Pitt have never played before, which I found really interesting. So whoever wins this one's going to have the winner, the lead in the series. UMass last year went 0-4. They were shut out in two. The closest loss was by 22 points. Obviously, UMass, the Minutemen, were not good last year. Their last win was September 28th, 2019. It was by 8 points. Pitt, on the other hand, they had 3 one-possession games last year. They had a 3-point win against number 24 at the time, Louisville. They had a 1-point loss against NC State, and they had a 1-point overtime loss to Boston College. This is the 5th year starting for Kenny Pickett, and honestly, this Pitt team could be a little bit dangerous in the South. Or, actually, coastal. I think it's the coastal region. UNC got knocked out by Virginia Tech a couple of nights ago. This is a coastal region that could go any direction, really. This is an insane coastal, but Kenny Pickett is one of the most solid quarterbacks in the ACC. I'm going to go with Kenny Pickett to win and cover this game on the ACC Network. At 3 o'clock, we got Louisiana Tech traveling down to Mississippi State. Louisiana Tech is 3-11 against Mississippi State. Mississippi State has a 4-game win streak against the Bulldogs. Now, the Bulldogs went 5-5 last year. They had 4 one-possession games. They went 3-1 in those games. They had a 1-point win against Southern Mississippi, a 4-point win against UTEP, a 1-point loss to UTSA, and a 3-point double overtime win against UAB, who eventually became the Conference USA champion. So pretty impressive win there. Their 4 other losses were blowout losses. They got blown out by BYU, Marshall. Actually, three. They had 3 blowout losses. Their other loss, I guess, wasn't a blowout loss. I forgot what I took those notes. But they got blown out by BYU, Marshall, and Georgia Southern. Look at Mississippi State side of things. First year Mike Leach actually did a pretty good job at somewhat turning this program around. They went 4-7. A 7-point loss to Arkansas, a 7-point win against Vanderbilt, a 7-point loss against Georgia, a 7-point loss against Ole Miss, and a 2-point win against Tulsa. Able to beat a very good Tulsa team last year by 2 points in the bowl game. They held Georgia and Ole Miss, 2 teams I think are going to be really good this year. They only lost by 7 points in this game, so it's pretty solid. They had their first win against LSU since 2017 this year, so that was pretty good too. And Will Rogers went 3-5 as a starter, which seems not good, but then you realize the other guy went 1-2. KJ Costello went 1-2, so obviously not ideal. Mississippi State's favored by 23 points in this game. I actually think that Louisiana Tech's normally a very solid football team, and I think 23 might be a little bit too much for this Mississippi State Bulldogs team. Give me Mississippi State to win on ESPNU, but Louisiana Tech to cover. At 3 o'clock, we got Central Michigan traveling to Missouri, down to Missouri, and Missouri's favored by 14 points in this game on the SEC Network. Now, Central Michigan went 3-3 last year. They had 3 one-possession games. They had a 3-point win against Ohio, an 8-point win against Eastern Michigan, and then a 1-point loss to Toledo. They lost their last 2 games. They started the season 3-1. They lost all the games Ty Brock started. So, obviously, they were doing fine until Ty Brock got into the thing, and then they lost a whole bunch. They went 3-1 with the other guy at QB. Missouri, on the other hand, these 2 teams have never played each other, by the way. Missouri went 5-5. They had a 4-point win against LSU, pretty impressive. They had a 7-point win against South Carolina, and they had a 2-point win against Arkansas. They won all of their games that were one possession. They won 5 of 8 down the stretch. So they started the season not great, but they ended up going on a 5-3 run. That's pretty solid. They started the season 0-2. So again, this was a Missouri team that was coached extremely well. Eli Drinkwitz. He came over from App State, if you remember him, after 1 year at App State. He had the best record of the 4 new SEC head coaches, and he was better than Pittman, Leach, and Kiffin. So that's obviously that's high marks for Drinkwitz. I think he's a very good head coach, and honestly, Central Michigan is not a MAC team I'm all that excited about this year. I like Missouri in this one to win and cover. Give me the Tigers. At 3 o'clock, we got Montana State traveling down to Wyoming. Now, Montana State have not played since 2019, but they went 11-4 that year. They had a 6-point overtime win against Cal Poly and a 4-point loss to North Dakota. Those were their only 2 those were only 2 one-possession games. They were able to survive a quarterback injury after 3 games. After 3 games, their starting quarterback got hurt, and they had to put a new one in. That's pretty impressive that they were able to survive that. Wyoming, on the other hand, they went 2-4 last year. Did not have a good season at all. They had a 3-point overtime loss to Nevada. Not good. A 1-point loss to New Mexico and an 8-point loss to Boise State. They ended the season 0-2. They lost their last 2 games. It was not good by the Cowboys. Honestly, they have not looked good in a long time. Since Josh Allen has been their quarterback, they have really been garbage. This is on the FCBK, by the way. I'm going to go with Montana State, honestly. I think Montana State's a solid FCS program, and Wyoming is a bad FBS program. This is the recipe, if ever, for an FCS over FBS upset. Give me Montana State, the Wildcats. 3:30, we got UNI, Northern Iowa, if you don't know, traveling to number 7, Iowa State on ESPN+. UNI last year went 3-4. They had a 4-point loss to San Diego State. They had a 1-point loss to Southern Illinois. They had a 7-point loss to Missouri State, and they had a 3-point loss to North Dakota State. So all 4 of their losses were close ones, and this could have been a 7-0 team last year. UNI is a team that is normally at the top of the FCS level. They're very, very good normally, so it's actually quite interesting to see them do not well last year. Iowa State, on the other hand, they had probably their best season of all time. They had a 3-point win against TCU. They had a 7-point win against number 18 Oklahoma. They had a 3-point loss against number 6 Oklahoma State. They had a 7-point win against Baylor, a 3-point win against number 17 Texas. I can't read my own handwriting. And they had a 6-point loss to number 10 Oklahoma. So this is an Iowa State team that was extremely good last year, extremely talented. They returned their talented running back, Bryce Hall, from last year. It's not a game that's going to be on ESPN+. I expect Iowa State to run away with it early. They also returned Bryce Perkins. I forgot to mention that. Oh, no, that's not his name. Dang it. Whoever they return, they return Brock Purdy. I don't know why his name slipped my mind. Brock Purdy They return him. He's a very, very solid quarterback. I expect Iowa State to run away with this one early. And then 3:30, we got number 23 UL Lafayette traveling to number 21 Texas. Texas favored by 9 points in this game, and they're 2-0 against the Raging Cajuns in their time. Now, Raging Cajuns last year had a very good year. They went 10-1. They had a 3-point overtime win against Georgia State. They had a 2-point win against Georgia Southern. They had a 3-point loss to Coastal Carolina, 4-point win against UAB, 7-point win against Arkansas State, 3-point win against App State, 7-point win against UTSA. As you can see, and they won 70-20 UL Monroe. I've mentioned UL Monroe earlier and how they got embarrassed, but as you can see, UL Lafayette played some pretty classic games last year, which is why I think this could end up being another classic against Texas. This is his first year for Steve Sarkisian coaching Texas. Now, Texas last year did not have a bad season by any means. They went 7-3. They had a 7-point overtime win against Texas Tech that was basically a miracle win by Sam Ehlinger. They had a 2-point loss to TCU, an 8-point loss to Oklahoma in quadruple overtime. They had a 7-point overtime win against number 6 Oklahoma State. They had a 4-point win against West Virginia, a 3-point loss to Iowa State. They returned their running back, Robinson, who was phenomenal last year, but they do lose Sam Ehlinger. I think this is going to be an interesting game, but I want the upset here on Fox. Honestly, I think the Raging Cajuns are extremely undervalued in this game. You're talking about a Texas team that has a lot of turnover this year, even though I'm a very big Longhorns fan. The Raging Cajuns returned a lot of their players that were so good a year ago. There's a reason why they were able to beat Iowa State last year in the first game. I expect the Raging Cajuns to win this one, despite being underdogs by 9. At 4 o'clock, we got San Jose State, which went 1-0 last year, traveling to number 15 USC, who was favored by 14 points on the Pac-12 network. Now, USC is 4-0 against San Jose State in their lifetime. Now, but San Jose State last year had one of their best seasons of all time. They went 7-1. They beat Boise State by 14 points. The only game they lost, there was a blowout loss in the Arizona Bowl by Ball State. But Ball State was phenomenal last year. I think it's hard to put that against San Jose State. USC, on the other hand, they went 5-1. Did not have that's a successful season for most, but USC has its eyes set on the playoffs. They had a 1-point win against Arizona State. They had a 4-point win against Arizona, 5-point win against UCLA, and then in the end, they were unable to pull out the win against Oregon, 7-point win against Oregon. So, a 7-point loss against Oregon. So, Caden Slovis last year was the comeback kid. He had 3 fourth-quarter comebacks where they were down by double digits. The game against Arizona State, Arizona, and UCLA, right? Unfortunately for all those teams, Caden Slovis is literally the comeback kid. He will do nothing for 3 quarters, and then the 4th quarter will go off. So, I think it's a really interesting team this year. USC has the talent to make a playoff run. But in my opinion, you're going to catch San Jose State's going to catch USC off guard. They're not going to win, but USC is going to not cover in this game. Give me San Jose State to cover, but USC to win. At 5 o'clock, we got Campbell traveling to Liberty. Liberty favored by 35 points in this game on ESPN 3. Campbell was 0-4 last year. Their only close game was a 1-point loss to Georgia Southern, which that's not a bad loss to have on your record, but like everything else is a bad loss to have. In 2019, they went 6-5, so again, not the best in 2019 either. And Liberty, on their hand, went 10-1 last year. It was a very good year for the Flames. They were I remember because I was making videos at one point about them because they were in the playoff conversation. Their first game, I believe, they had a 6-point win against Western Kentucky. Then they had a 2-point win against FIU. They had a 3-point win against Virginia Tech. I remember that game because Virginia Tech blocked the field goal, but Justin Fuente took a timeout right before that, so it didn't count. And then Liberty made the field goal. They had a 1-point loss to NC State. That was their loss. And they had a 3-point overtime win over Coastal Carolina. This is a Liberty team that was very good last year. I expect them to still be very good. Malik Wilson is a possible first-round pick. He has the arm strength to be a first-round pick, a high value, a high reward, high risk kind of situation. I think Liberty's going to blow out Campbell. They really have a good team built together this year. Give me Liberty to win and cover. At 5 o'clock, we got Gardner-Webb traveling to Georgia Southern on ESPN 3. Gardner-Webb last year went 2-2. They had their only one-possession game was a 7-point overtime win over Presbyterian. And 2019, they went 3-9. They had a 3-point win over Western Carolina, an 8-point win over Hampton, a 2-point triple overtime loss to Campbell, a 3-point loss to Charleston Southern, and a 4-point loss to North Alabama. Georgia Southern, on the other hand, had a very insane year last year, despite playing they played 12 games, and it's like 9 of those 12 games were one-possession games. That's how insane last year was for Georgia Southern. They had a 1-point win against Campbell. They decided to start the season off with a bang. They had a 2-point loss to UL Lafayette. They had a 5-point win against UL Monroe. They had a 7-point win against South Alabama. They had a 7-point win against Troy, a 2-point win against Texas State, a 1-point loss against Army, 6-point loss to Georgia State, and an 8-point loss to App State. And remember, one of the games that they played in was a bowl game. So, like, it was crazy. It was a crazy year for Georgia Southern. They went 8-5 though. They were very solid, and I still think this is going to be a team to beat in the Sun Belt Conference. Give me Georgia Southern to win this game and cover. At 6 o'clock, we got Syracuse traveling to Ohio. Syracuse is favored by 1 point in this game, so it should be rather close. Syracuse went 1-10 last year. They had a very bad year. By the way, Syracuse is 2-0 against Ohio in their long time running history. That was a 7-point. They had a one possession game. That was a 7-point loss to NC State. Ohio also did not have. They had a pretty solid year, actually. Now that I think about it, they went 2-1. They had a 3-point loss to Central Michigan. That was their only loss on their resume. Now, but the games that, again, they had games against Miami, Ohio, Buffalo, and Kent State. They were all canceled. The combined record for teams they beat Akron and Bowling Green was 1-10 last year. So obviously they went 2-1, but it was not against high quality competition at all. So I think Syracuse is going to win this game. It's on CBS Sports Network, by the way. But Syracuse is a better team, in my opinion, than Ohio, although it could be really close. Don't think it'll be obviously 1 point. That just says who's going to win. That's basically a pick 'em game. Give me Syracuse to win this one. Check another sheet. This is the Oregon State at Purdue matchup. This is going to be Saturday at 6 o'clock, I believe, for us. For Central Time, by the way. I'm doing all these in Central Time, if you did not know. Spread, Purdue is favored by 7 points in this game, but most of the public is betting on Oregon State, the Beavers, to win this one. The last time they played, Oregon State did actually win this game. It was in 1967, and they won 22-14. Now, Oregon State last year went 2-5, but in my opinion, it was a more impressive 2-5 than Purdue's. They had a 6-point loss to Washington, 4-point win against Cal, and then they had a 3-point win against number 15, Oregon, right? That was the game where their starting quarterback got hurt, so obviously the 2 other games did not go well, but they ended up still having only a 6-point loss against Utah. Oh my god, I thought I said Utah. I have a bad penmanship. And then they had a 3-point loss to Stanford. So, like, this is an Oregon State team that's on the rise, in my opinion. I think they could be bowl eligible this year. At Purdue, on the other hand, they went 2-4 last year. Did not have the best year. They had a 4-point win against Iowa, 7-point win against Illinois. They had a 7-point loss against number 23 Northwestern, 3-point loss against Minnesota, 7-point loss to Rutgers. But, like, if you turn 3 of those games around, this could have been a 5-1 team last year. Purdue played some close games. Honestly, the Northwestern game could have gone either way. It was just the refs that kind of cheated Purdue out of a win there. I think Purdue's going to be very solid this year, but I think Oregon State's actually going to be a really good team to beat. I think this is going to be a Pac-12 that's actually kind of nasty this year. But I think Oregon State's going to end up pulling off the upset. Give me the Beavers to upset the Boilermakers in Week 1. I had to get my notes. My dad slid some notes under the door. At 7 o'clock, we got 6 o'clock. We got Eastern Illinois traveling to South Carolina. South Carolina's favored by 42 points on the SEC Network. Now, Eastern Illinois had only 1 win last year, and it was against Tennessee Tech 28-20. South Carolina, on the other hand, he put 2 games that he thought were noteworthy. They had one possession game, and I think they lost to Tennessee 31-27, and the other game that they got absolutely crushed in was they lost to Texas A&M 48-3. That was the expected, though. South Carolina Gamecocks are not a phenomenal football team. I feel like most people would agree with that statement. On the other hand, though, the SEC, Eastern Illinois is a really bad FCS team, so I feel like there's a reason why South Carolina is favored by 42 points. Give me the Gamecocks and the points here. At 6 o'clock, we got Norfolk State traveling to Toledo on ESPN3. Now, 2019 was the last time Norfolk State played. They went 5-7. They had a 3-point loss to Old Dominion, a 2-point loss to Florida A&M, and a 3-point overtime loss to South Carolina State. So honestly, this was not a horrible team 2 years ago. Toledo, on the other hand, went 4-2 last year. Very good, very respectable record. They only had 2 losses, and there was a 3-point loss to Western Michigan, a 3-point loss to Ball State, and then their only other one-position game was a 1-point win against Central Michigan. So, this is the team that could have gone 6-0 last year. This is a very solid Toledo team. I love the Rockets this year. I think they're a very, very good team. I think they're contenders in the MAC. So I definitely think they're going to beat Norfolk State. I think they're a way better team than Norfolk State. So obviously, give me Toledo here. Dang it, that's bad. 6 o'clock, we got Central Arkansas, the Bears, traveling down to Arkansas State, the Red Wolves. The Red Wolves are favored by 13 points, which I think is a little bit disrespectful, if I'm going to be honest, on ESPN3. Central Arkansas went 5-4 last year. They had a 7-point win against Austin Peay. They got a 7-point win against Missouri State, and they had a 3-point loss to Eastern Kentucky. Arkansas State, on the other hand, they had 5 one-possession games. They had also had a very impressive win. They had a 4-point win against Kansas State. Impressive win, in my opinion. They had a 7-point win against Georgia State. They had a 7-point loss to UL Lafayette. It's a 2-point loss against Texas State. That's not very impressive at all. And a 7-point loss to USA, South Alabama. So, what do I think about Arkansas? I think Arkansas is not the best Sun Belt team, but I do think they're solid. I think Red Wolves are a very solid team. I've always been wondering about how they run a 2-quarterback system in Arkansas State. At least they did last year, and I've never been a huge fan of that. I think you need to find. I remember there's a saying: if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. I think that's true with Arkansas State. I don't think Arkansas State has anyone that's really going to blow you away, but I do think they're very solid on defense. They have a good run game, and I think they take care of the ball extremely well. I expect Arkansas State to blow out Central Arkansas. Then we got Akron-Auburn. That's on this sheet that my dad pulled out. Actually, I put this one down. Akron-Auburn. Auburn's favored by 36.5 in this game. It's on ESPN Plus if you want to watch it. It's at 6 o'clock, by the way. We have Akron went 1-5 last year. Not a good team at all by any means. Auburn also did not have the best year, which is why they fired Gus Malzahn and hired Brian Harsin. I think is how you pronounce his name. They had 2 one-possession games. They had a 2-point win against Arkansas and a 7-point win against Ole Miss. Now, I don't think Auburn's going to be great this year. I think it's going to take a little while to dig him out of the hole that Gus Malzahn put him in. But Auburn is favored by 36.5 points, and the fact is Akron is absolutely atrocious at everything sports-related. I mean, it's Akron. God, they suck. But the Zips are really bad this year. I think they were really bad last year. They're going to be really bad this year. Give me Auburn to win and cover this game. At 6 o'clock, we got Nicholls State traveling to Memphis on ESPN+. Nicholls State went 4-3, but they won 4 of their last 5. Their only one-possession games were a 7-point win against Northwestern State and a 7-point loss to Southeast Louisiana. Now, Memphis, on the other hand, had a 5 one-possession games last year. It had a disappointing 8-3 season, but they had a 3-point loss to SMU, 1-point win against UCF, a 1-point win against USF, which is not good. They had a 3-point win against Navy and 3-point win against Houston. The only game that could have been a toss-up was the SMU game. They got blown out by Cincinnati and Tulane, I want to say, last year, which the Tulane was a little bit embarrassing. Cincinnati less so. But I do think Memphis is going to be a really solid team this year. I think Ryan Silverfield's going to get that stuff together, although I do believe it's going to be a little bit more difficult without Brady White there and DeMonte Coxey. I still think the Tigers are going to be very solid, and at the very least, they're going to win this game by a lot. Give me Memphis to win and cover. At 6 o'clock, we got Monmouth traveling to Middle Tennessee. Monmouth went 3. It's on ESPN3, by the way. They went 3-1 last year. They had 6 points. They had a 6-point postseason loss against Sam Houston State, who turned out to be the national champs. So that's the only game they lost, and it was the only one-possession game they had. Middle Tennessee, on the other hand, had 5 one-possession games last year. They had a 2-point loss to UTSA, a 3-point loss to Western Kentucky, a 3-point win against FIU, a 6-point double overtime win over Rice, and a 3-point win over Troy. They started the season 0-4, and they obviously had a really bad start, but they ended up going 3-2 over the stretch, so they were able to turn it around. I actually like the Raiders this year. I think they're a very solid program. I don't think they're going to do much in their conference. I think they're actually not going to do anything in their conference, but Conference USA, that is. But I do think they're going to be able to destroy Monmouth. They should be able to win and cover this pretty easily. At 6 o'clock, we got Missouri State traveling down to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State being favored by 38 points on ESPN+. Missouri State went 5-5 last year, including a 7-point loss against Central Arkansas, a 6-point win against Western Illinois, a 3-point win over South Dakota, a 7-point win over UNI, 3-point win over Southern Illinois. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, had a little bit more of an up-and-down season. They had one of their better seasons at 8-3, but they were expected to be playoff eligible. They lose a very good receiver in Tylan Wallace this year, and they lose a really good running back in Chuba Hubbard, so I'm going to be interested if Spencer Sanders can carry them without those two players. They had a 3-point win last year against Iowa State. They had a 7-point overtime loss to Texas. They had a 2-point win against Kansas State, a 6-point win against Texas Tech, a 7-point loss to TCU, a 3-point win against Miami in their bowl game. It's really going to be interesting. I actually do think Oklahoma State is a much better team than Missouri State. I feel like most people do. Which is why I'm going to take Oklahoma State to cover on ESPN+. At 6 o'clock, we got Abilene Christian traveling to SMU. SMU's favored by 32 points on this game on ESPN+. Abilene Christian is 1-5 this year. Last year they had a 4-point loss to UTEP. They had a 3-point overtime loss to SFA, and they had a 3-point win against Mercer. On the other hand, in 2020, SMU went 7-3. They had a 7-point win against Texas State, 3-point win against number 25 Memphis, 3-point overtime win against Tulane, and a 4-point loss to Tulsa. They started out the season 5-0. The little thing I'm worried about for SMU is a large part of their offense since the new head coach has taken over has been Shane Buechele. Shane Buechele has been the go-to guy for SMU. Now they have to move on to a new quarterback for the first time under, I don't remember what head coach's name. But I think you start out the season with a pretty easy win against Abilene Christian. Obviously, give me SMU to win and cover here. Baylor at 6 o'clock is traveling to Texas State. Texas State is an underrated team. Actually, it's not that underrated. I think it might be a little bit overrated in this game, but I'll talk about it later. Baylor is favored by 13.5 points on ESPN+. Now, Baylor is 7-0 against Texas State, so obviously good there. But last year they did not have a good season. They went 2-7. They had a 6-point double overtime loss to West Virginia, a 7-point loss to number 17 Iowa State, a 1-point loss to Texas Tech, and a 1-point win against Kansas State. So again, Baylor did not have the best year, and then their starting quarterback Charlie Brewer transferred away. Dave Aranda is really very much on a hot seat this year if he does not turn this thing around. Texas State, on the other hand, went 2-10, but they had some close games. They had a 7-point loss to SMU, 3-point double overtime win, loss to UTSA, a 3-point loss to Boston College, a 2-point loss to Georgia Southern, and a 2-point win against Arkansas State. So again, this is a Texas State team that really held close with a lot of good teams last year, although wasn't able to pull it out. I still think Baylor is a way better team than the Bobcats ever will be, so give me Baylor to win and cover this game, obviously. At 6 o'clock, we got Texas Tech traveling, actually playing Houston, I think on a neutral field. Houston favored by 1.5 points in this game on ESPN. Texas Tech went 4-6 last year. They had a 2-point win against Houston Baptist. That was a scary game for them. 7-point overtime loss to number 8 Texas. A 7-point win against West Virginia, a 1-point win against Baylor, a 6-point loss to number 23 Oklahoma State, and a 3-point win against Kansas. Texas Tech is 13-18 against Houston, and Houston has a 3-game win streak going on right now. Houston, on the other hand, went 3-5 last year. They had the only one possession game was a 3-point loss to Memphis, but they do return Clayton Tune, who is a junior. He returns a quarterback. So why is Clayton Tune important? He was a large reason why they actually were close with BYU before BYU ran away with it in the fourth quarter. They actually had the lead heading into the fourth. So again, this is a Houston team that really relies a lot on the passing game. You're going to need a good passer, and Clayton Tune is that. I think Houston's going to win this one. I think this is going to be one of the rare teams where the Group of 5 plays the Power 5, and I think Houston is going to win this football game. At 6 o'clock, we got Southern traveling to Troy on ESPN3. Southern went 5-1 last year. They had a 3-point win against Alabama State, 3-point loss to Arkansas Pine Bluff, and a 2-point win against Alcorn State. By the way, that was the funniest score I've ever seen in my life, and it was 2-0. Imagine watching that game live. It's on ESPN3, by the way. Troy went 5-6 last year. They had a 2-point win against Eastern Kentucky, 2-point loss to Georgia State, 7-point loss to Georgia Southern, 3-point loss to Middle Tennessee, 4-point loss to Coastal Carolina, and the App State loss was the only one that was probably unavoidable. And there was obviously another loss because it went 5-6, but they lost 47-10. But honestly, this could have been a very different ball game, a different ball team, if they win some of these close games, and that's actually something of a good sign for Troy. They're actually playing in close games, but I like Troy in this one. I'm a homer. I think Troy's going to have a somewhat decent year this year. I think Troy's a decent football team, and I think they're going to 100% beat Southern. So now we got Florida Atlantic at 6:30, traveling to number 13, Florida. FAU lost to Marshall 20-9 last year, and Georgia Southern 20-3. Those were their big losses last year. Yeah, Florida, on the other hand, they had that they had a very good year last year. Obviously, you had the Texas A&M loss, 38-41. They lost to LSU. If you remember that game, they went the final score 37-34. That was a big deal because it knocked Florida out of playoff contention. And then they had the 24-17 win over. I actually don't know. I don't know what my dad just wrote. But they did play Alabama rather close, and they did have a big win over Georgia last year. I'd say last year was a successful season for Florida, but they do have to replace a lot of key playmakers, including Kadarius Toney and their starting quarterback, Kyle Trask, so it's going to be a big deal. But Florida Atlantic is a good game to start out with, especially without Lane Kiffin there. Florida's favored at 24.5 points. I expect that to stay, and I expect Florida to cover that. At 6:30, we got Northern Illinois traveling to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech favored by 19 points in this one. Northern Illinois went 0-6 last year. They had 3 one-possession games. They had a 6-point loss to Ball State, 3-point loss to Western Michigan, and an 8-point loss to Eastern Michigan. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, only had one possession game, and that was the 3-point win against Florida State. Did not have any really games last year they could have won that they didn't. But honestly, Georgia Tech did look good last year. Sims looks like a rather good quarterback there. I think the Yellow Jackets could be a team that surprises a couple people this year on the ACC network. By the way, this is what that game's on. The Yellow Jackets, I think, are going to be extremely solid this year. I think they're going to make a bowl game. But I think Georgia Tech's going to blow out Northern Illinois in this one. Give me Georgia Tech to win and cover. At 6:30, we got William and Mary traveling to Virginia on the CHSS network. William and Mary went 1-2 last year. Their only one possession game was a 7-point win against Richmond. In 2019, they went 5-7. Virginia, on the other hand, went 5-5 last year, and they went 1-1 in one possession games, especially against ranked teams. They had a 5-point loss to number 11 Miami, but they did have a 3-point win against number 15 UNC. Virginia's an interesting team. I don't have a lot of faith in their quarterback situation since Bryce Perkins has left. But I do think the Cavaliers are good enough to beat the Tribe. Give me obviously Virginia to win and cover here. And at 6:30, we got UTSA traveling to Illinois. The spread for Illinois is favored by 6.5. Public betting had 53% of people have put their money on Illinois. They've never played before, so that's interesting to me. UTSA went 7-5 last year, a very good, productive season for UTSA. They had a 3-point double overtime win over Texas State. They had a 2-point win over Middle Tennessee. They had an 8-point loss to UAB, but still very solid to play UAB that close. 7-point loss to BYU. Obviously, they were number 15 at the time, so again, a close loss there. 3-point win against Southern Mississippi. 7-point loss against UL Lafayette. Again, another solid team last year. Illinois so far is 1-0 on the year, and they went 2-6 last year. A large part of why Lovie Smith was fired. They had 2 one-possession games, and they had a 7-point loss against Purdue and a 3-point win against Rutgers. So, obviously, Illinois is a team that is interesting. Obviously, Brett Bielema is a very solid head coach, but UTSA is a team that I think could end up sneaking in here. I think UTSA is going to sneak into Illinois. They're going to be high after beating Nebraska last week, but I think Illinois is going to sneak into that. UTSA is going to sneak into Illinois and pull out the upset. At 6:30, we've got Northwestern State traveling to North Texas. Northwestern State went 1-5 last year, but they did start 0-5, so they won their last game. Yeah, they had a 7-point loss to Nicholls State, a 3-point loss to Southeast Louisiana. They had an 8-point loss to Lamar. They had an 8-point loss to Sam Houston State, which became the national champions, and they had a 2-point win against Incarnate World. So again, they had 4 games that could have gone either way. They could have been they all went the bad way for almost all of them went bad way for Northwestern State, but there is a universe where this team was 5-1 last year. North Texas, on the other hand, had only won one possession game. They finished 4-6 last year, and they had a 2-point win over UTEP. North Texas is a better football team. I'm sorry to say it. They're not a great football team. I don't even think they're going to be bowl eligible this year, but they are a better team than Northwestern State. Sorry, Northwestern State fans. This game's going to be on ESPN 3 if you want to watch it. I think it's going to be not a great game. I think North Texas is going to run away with it. I put my money on North Texas to win and cover. Then we got Georgia-Clemson game at 6:30. We got number 5 Georgia traveling to actually, I think they play in a neutral field against Clemson. Although neutral field, I think it's Georgia home field advantage really. They had Clemson obviously had a very good year last year. They ended up as the number 2, 3. I think they were the 3 seed last year. The 3 seed. They played Ohio State. They got crushed in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting. DJ Uiagalelei or whatever. I can't pronounce his name. I'm going to call him DJU. DJU went 1-1 last year. They had a very close game against Boston College. It makes me feel like I don't trust him as much in big time games. He had a close game against Notre Dame, though he ended up losing it. This is a game I think I'd put my money on Georgia, honestly. Georgia returns JT Daniels and many of their starters on defense. They have obviously have a good running back room. Their receiving core is a little bit, in my opinion, questionable, but I do think JT Daniels is going to go to Clemson. Clemson, by the way, is favored by 3.5 points in this game. I think Georgia's going to walk away from Clemson with an upset win. ACC is not going to have a clear person that's going to make the playoffs. At 7 o'clock, we got Southern Mississippi traveling to South Alabama. South Alabama favored by 1 point, so obviously going to be close on ESPN+. Southern Mississippi went 3-7 last year. They had a 1-point loss to Louisiana Tech, a 3-point loss to Western Kentucky, a 3-point loss to UTSA. So obviously those 3 games go differently. This is a whole different ball to club we're looking at. And South Alabama, they had a 3-point loss to Tulane last year, a 7-point loss to Georgia Southern, a 7-point win against Arkansas State. So again, this is a game. These games could have gone a lot of different ways, and I think South Alabama could be a different team. They've only played once, and South Alabama won that matchup 32-21 by, I believe, in 2016. I think Southern Alabama is a solid team this year. They have a really good receiver that I think is going to go in the first 5 rounds, which is impressive for South Alabama. They normally do not get players drafted. I think that guy is really, really solid. I expect him to go in the first 5 rounds, which is decently high. I think South Alabama is going to win this game. I have more faith in the Jaguars than I do Southern Mississippi. Give me South Alabama to win and cover. 7 o'clock, we got Duquesne. I'm sorry, I probably pronounced that wrong. Traveling to TCU. TCU's favorite at 42 points on ESPN+. Duquesne last year started 4-0 before having a 7-point overtime loss to Sacred Heart. But on the bright side, their only other one-possession game was a 3-point win over Sacred Heart. So they split that. That's how it worked out for Duquesne last year. At TCU, on the other hand, went 6-4. Max Duggan is a large part of their confidence this year, though. They had a 3-point loss to Iowa State. They had a 2-point win against number 9 Texas at the time. 7-point loss to Kansas State, and a 7-point win against number 15 Oklahoma State. So again, this is a TCU team that a lot of people have as their most underrated team in the Big 12. This is a team that I could see going quite far and maybe even making the Big 12 championship. This is a very solid TCU team, so I'd put my money on TCU to cover this spread. At 7 o'clock, we got Kent State traveling to number 6 Texas A&M. Kent State did not have the best year last year in the MAC. Texas A&M had won. They beat LSU 20-7 last year. They also had the big Florida win. Many of you remember 41-38. Okay, their only loss I see for Kent State was the loss to Buffalo 70-4, which 4 is the most insane score I've ever seen. But that means your defense is the only one scoring, which is not good for Kent State. Obviously, I don't put a lot of faith into Kent State. I'm a little bit worried about Texas A&M this year, considering they move on from Kellen Mond, and he was such a huge part of their offense. But I believe A-Chain is enough to be able to win and win by a lot here. This game's on ESPNU, by the way, if you want to watch it. But I believe Texas A&M's able to cover the 29.5-point spread. And then you have Vandy playing ETSU. They had 2 losses last year, 2 big ones at least. They had lost to Furman 17-13, and they lost to Mercer's 21-13. Vandy, on the other hand, obviously did not have the best years. They had 2 close games that not a lot of people expected them to. Remember, starting out the season, they only lost by 5 points to Texas A&M, and it was a very close game. The final score 17-12. So again, Vandy played Texas A&M close at the beginning of the year, which would have been insane if they had beaten them. 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I know it's 7 o'clock, Vandy played, Kentucky lost last year as well to Vandy. Kentucky, they lost to Kentucky as well, 38-35, but again, those were 2 closer games than most people expected. This is on the SEC Network, by the way. My dad did not give me a spread for this game, unfortunately, but I'm going to put my money on Vandy. I think Vandy's going to beat ETSU by a decent amount of points. 7 o'clock, we got Montana traveling to number 20 Washington. Washington's favored by 22.5 points on the Pac-12 network. Montana went 2-0 last year in 2019 and went 10-4, so a little bit better there. Montana's a pretty solid team, if I'm going to be honest, in the FCS level. Washington, on the other hand, was a very good team last year. They started out the season 3-0. They had their 1 possession games. They had a 6-point win over Oregon State, a 3-point win over Utah. Fortunately for them, they had a 5-point loss to Stanford. But regardless, Washington did end up winning the North. But unfortunately for them, they got COVID, so they could not play in the Pac-12 championship, which caused Oregon to go instead, and Oregon beat USC. So who knows what could have happened if Washington had gone instead? Probably a Pac-12 championship under their belt. But I do think Washington's a way better team than Montana. Montana could keep it close. I could see that happening, but I don't think it's going to. Washington's going to win and cover. Dang. I forgot that. I thought that was the end of the SEC games, but it is not. At 8 o'clock, 8:30, we got number 16 LSU going to UCLA. LSU had some bad losses last year. They had the Missouri loss, 45-41, and they had the Mississippi State loss, 44-34. So again, those were 2 bad losses by LSU. They did end up making up for it with a Florida loss at the end of the year, but LSU had a down year last year. Now, UCLA had a up and down season last year. They had a Colorado loss, 48-42, and they had an Oregon loss, 38-35, but they also ended up finishing with a pretty solid record. They played some pretty good teams close, so I could see UCLA being really good this year. By the way, they did end up destroying Hawaii last week, so this is going to be interesting. LSU's favored by 3.5 points. This game's on Fox, by the way. I think UCLA is going to dominate in this game. I think UCLA is the better football team here. I'm surprised they're not ranked, and I think UCLA is going to take care of business at home. I think they're going to win. At 8 o'clock, we got Beth Cookman traveling to UTEP, who went 1-0, won last week on ESPN3. 2019, they went 7-4. Beth Cookman went 7-4. They had an 8-point win against Howard, 8-point loss against South Carolina State, a 3-point loss against Delaware State. But they started the season 6-1. So I mean, Beth Cookman didn't kind of falter down the stretch. They went 1-3, but still started out the season relatively strong. UTEP last year went 3-5. They had a 4-point win against ACU, 4-point loss to Louisiana Tech, and a 2-point loss to North Texas. Again, UTEP was not great last year. Far from great. Definitely the second best UT school. If you're counting Texas, third best UT school. I guess UT, University of Texas, and UTSA are both better than UTEP, but UTEP is the better team here. I think 100%. I expect them to win and cover this game. At 9:30, we got BYU traveling to Arizona. BYU is favored by 12.5 points in this game on ESPN. BYU went 11-1 last year, I'd like to remind people. Very good season, but a large part of that was Zach Wilson, who left for the draft. They had a 7-point win against UT. They had 2 one-possession games. They had a 7-point win against UTSA, and then they ended up scheduling a last-second Coastal Carolina game, and that ended up not working out for them. They had a 5-point loss to Coastal Carolina last year, who was also very good. But you look at this record; it's very close. 11-12. BYU has won this matchup 11 times. Arizona has won it 12 times. This is a chance for BYU to even it up. BYU has a 2-game win streak in this series. Now you look at Arizona; they only had one possession game last year. They ended up the season 0-5. They had a 4-point loss to number 20 USC. Their last win was October 5th, 2019. Maybe they can get it here. I doubt it though. I think BYU is still a better team than Arizona, despite losing their star quarterback. That's the reason why they're favored by 12.5. I expect them to win by that and a lot. Arizona's in a mess right now. At 9:30, we got Nevada traveling to Cal. Cal's favored by 3 points in this game on FS1. Nevada started the season 5-0, but ended up going 2-2 down the stretch. Still finished with a 7-2 record, which is pretty solid. They had a 3-point overtime win against Wyoming, a 7-point win against New Mexico, a 5-point win against SDSU, and their only one possession loss was a 3-point loss to Hawaii. Now, Nevada has kind of been dominated in this series. Cal is 22-3 over Nevada all time, but Nevada has a 2-game win streak in this series, though. I'll explain who I'm going to pick later. Cal went 1-3 last year, but they did start 0-3, so they won their last game. They had a 4-point loss against Oregon State. They had a 1-point loss to Stanford and a 4-point win against number 23 Oregon, which was an impressive win to end up the season. Now, Cal is a team that's been up and down. I expect their defense to be good, but their offense has always been not phenomenal. I think Nevada is one of the better Mountain West teams. I've always thought that the Wolfpack is always putting together solid teams. I think Nevada is a better team than Cal. I think they're going to travel to Cal and pull off the upset. At 9:30, we got New Mexico State, which went 0-1, which means they're out of the playoff discussion. But SDSU has yet to play. San Diego State, that is. San Diego State's favored by 31 points on CBS Sports Network. New Mexico State went 1-1 last year, with their only win being a 7-point win against Dixie State. That was the only close game. They went 2-10 the year before that, with their only close games being a 3-point loss to New Mexico and a 7-point loss to Liberty. SDSU, on the other hand, went 4-4 last year, not the best record, but their only one-position game was a 5-point loss to Nevada. Now, in the series, New Mexico State is 1-10, and San Diego State has an 8-game win streak. I think that continues here today. The Aztecs are a way better team than New Mexico State ever will be. Give me SDSU to win in the landslide. At 10 o'clock, we got Utah State traveling to Washington State. Washington State's favored by 17.5 points in this game on the Pac-12 Network. Utah State went 1-5 last year, and they started out 0-4, so at the very least, they ended the season 1-1. But their only win was a 41-27 against New Mexico, and New Mexico is not known for being a good football team in the slightest. Washington State, on the other hand, did not have the best season. They went 1-3. They started out winning their first game against Oregon State, but then they lost to number 11 Oregon, number 20 USC, and Utah in the stretch. Now, they've only played 3 times, but Washington State has won 2 of those 3 matchups. The win streak is 1, and it was Utah State. Utah State won the last matchup in 1961, so we're seeing a first matchup since 1961 between these 2 teams. It's going to be interesting. I think Utah State could keep it closer than most people expect. Washington State was not great last year, but Utah State hasn't really been solid since Jordan Love left. So I expect Washington State to win this game, but I think Utah State will cover.